Well, with the big story here, I'm Seher Zama. We're discussing what has happened in the Supreme Court today regarding the Sabarimala issue. The 5-judge bench, which has kept the review pleas and the writ petitions related to Sabarimala still pending, but it wants to give in more time on the larger question, which is related to Articles 25, 26 and essential religious practices. That is to be considered by a 7-judge bench later. This widens the scope of the debate. The Apex Court has noted that entry of women into places of worship are not just limited to the case of the Sabarimala temple alone, but also involving the entry of women into mosques and other areas, religious areas as well. There is, though, on ground, nothing that changes for Sabarimala. There is no stay on the top court's earlier order, which meant that for now, women of all ages will still be allowed to enter Sabarimala.
They have accepted the review petition. First of all, they accepted the review petition and then handed over it to the higher bench. So that's a very welcome action by the Supreme Court. And we were praying for this also. We think that the Lord Ayyappa heard what we were praying. And just minutes earlier, we were praying to them, to the Lord Ayyappa. And we think they have heard all these things and taken a decision in favor of us.
Law gives some elbow room to faith too. So that is the most important thing, and I think we should celebrate this particular verdict. Article 25 and 26, especially 26, the way we run the particular shrine, the DT site, it all will be there. And please remember, this will empower every temple, church and mosque across India, and everyone will have their own right to self-determination.
हमें पूरी तरह फिर से एक उम्मीद है कि अभी निर्णय जो है वो 3+2 का आ रहा था. इसमें 3 जज का जो स्टेटमेंट था वो महिलाओं के बाजू से था और 7 जज का जब बेंच वहाँ पे निर्णय के लिए आएगा तो पूरी तरह महिलाओं के अधिकार की ही जो है वहाँ पे जीत होगी.
The deity should be left alone for following his meditation and his whatever studies what he's doing. So we women between the age of 10 to 50 don't particularly go there. Now why the court has now moved it to a 7-member bench is because they need time to review this again. They need time to investigate more into this matter, and I am very hopeful that dharma will be upheld very soon.
I think there is partial success for our point of view. As you know, I appeared for the board in Kerala, and our contention was that faith and feeling in religious terms, which is protected constitutionally under Articles 25 and 26, have to be respected unless very clearly derogable under constitutional limits. To the extent that the review proceedings have referred it to a larger bench, connected with several other matters, some of which also I am appearing in, including Dawoodi Bohra, etc. I think there is a partial recognition that the original Sabarimala judgment may need reconsideration. So there again is partial success.
To discuss this further, we have with us our panelists, Ms. Yogita Bhayana, social activist, Kevin Matthew, Sunny spokesperson of the Save Sabarimala. I beg your pardon. Appreciate you being with us. Stay on with us very quickly. First, going across to our correspondent Paul, who's right there, very close to the shrine, which is at Pattanam Titta here. Paul, on how this is being received on ground, because once again, we're very close to the season of pilgrimage, which is usually in the months of December, January. How will this impact on ground? What are the first reactions on ground that you felt?
Sir, I was in Pandalam, where we have the Pandalam Palace, where the royal family stays, and also the Pandalam Temple, where the ornaments and the jewelry of the Sabarimala shrine are located. So we were there, we interacted with Shashi Kumar Verma, who is the president of the Palace Trust Board, and he was ecstatic. He's saying it's a partial victory for them. They're very happy and satisfied with what has come from the Supreme Court. He's saying the very fact that they're reconsidering and they've moved it, referred it to a larger bench itself shows there was an issue with the previous verdict, and that is why they're reconsidering it. Also, the fact that 3:2 is the ratio now, which means it's better off from the 4:1 which was before. So all in all, they're very happy, but there is this confusion about the stay. They were very curious to know whether the stay of the previous verdict will continue, because if the stay is not there, it means that women can continue to enter, which is a problem. Last time we saw a couple of women who were trying to enter, despite the fact that the Supreme Court had lifted the ban saying women of the age of 10 to 50 or 55 can enter. There were large-scale protests there. Journalists were manhandled, stone pelting happened, media vehicles were burned, all that we saw last time. So despite the fact that Supreme Court had lifted the ban, the devotees were not really agreeing to that. They were saying, we will ensure that women are not entering. So on one hand, the Travancore Devasthanam board has requested people to ensure that there is peace and no kind of violence. Even today, Shashi Kumar Verma, the president of the Pandalam Palace Trust, happened to say that they're very happy and they requested devotees to maintain calm and peace. At the same breath, he said, it is now the responsibility of the Kerala government to ensure that peace and tranquility exists, because lakhs of people on Sunday, Magaravilaka happens on Saturday evening, that is, it's going to open up, and lakhs of people are going to travel to Pamba, Nilakil and then to Sannidhanam starting this weekend. So they are gearing up, police deployment happening, the collector visited the spot to ensure that arrangements are in place. But what happens when women try to enter this time? Because there's no clarity as to whether the stay upholds, whether the stay has been removed. So even the government is trying to take legal opinion. Even the Palace Trust Board says they happen to contact their lawyer in Supreme Court, but they're not getting any clarity as to what about the stay. So that is very crucial at the moment, some clarity to come in about the stay. Otherwise, I put forward a question saying, are you worried that women will again try to
There is a sense of that clarity, Paul. I'm going to have my colleague...
We are scared about activists entering.
Right, I'm going to have my colleague Tanima explain this further on what really happened in the Supreme Court and what this means for the next season, which starts usually in the month of December, January. Yes, Tanima, please go ahead.
That's right, Sahir. As Paul was also saying, it is a very, very contentious issue, of course. For the moment, it is a bit of a status quo. But let's just look at what the Supreme Court had to say today. Essentially, what the bench said is that what is essential religious practice, that aspect has to be decided by a larger bench. So the review pleas have been kept on hold, but it is essentially this aspect which a 7-judge bench is going to take up. Second point, if we look at, the Supreme Court also made some other key observations. They also said, the bench said that the entry of women into places of worship is not limited to the Sabarimala temple alone. So essentially trying to say that the Supreme Court bench which takes up the matter should also look into the aspect of women's entry into mosques or women's entry into other temples, not just the Sabarimala temple. So that aspect should also be dealt with. The Supreme Court also made some other key observation, essentially saying, tied up to the previous point, that the issues of women's entry into places of worship is not just limited to this temple, but it is also about entry of women into mosques. So several key observations being made by the Supreme Court bench today, essentially saying that that larger issue of whether or not women can enter into places of worship, that needs to be examined properly by a 7-judge bench. But otherwise, the larger batch of petitions and pleas related to review of the earlier judgment on Sabarimala, that has in fact been kept on hold.
Okay, so there is some clarity in what we're going to be looking at in this season. Our correspondent Pramod is there as well to get us further inputs here. Pramod, this would once again mean in a certain kind of preparations that need to be on ground. If women of a certain age who are going to go ahead and try to be part of the pilgrimage, they could still be stopped. We could still see some protests on ground. And the effort would be here to avoid the ugliness that we'd seen in the past, to avoid the violence in those protests that we'd seen in the past.
Pramod. Well, one thing one thing we can see is that the Pandalam royal family and even the LDF, UDF, the Congress party of Kerala, they are actually stating that this is almost a kind of victory for them because the Supreme Court did not give a clear-cut answer, but they have sent it to a larger bench. At the same time, we cannot predict anything so far because there is a chance for, just like you mentioned, for protests to occur because last year the same kind of issue arose and it became utterly chaotic because after Kerala rains, they had to immediately face a situation where the Kerala government did not know what exactly do. Should they actually relocate the manpower to make sure that the devotees get all the infrastructure that is required, basic infrastructure, or to use it to control the crowd? That was the bigger problem they faced at that point because the entire Sabarimala shrine and the whole path goes up a forest, up a hill, and from Nilakal itself they had so much trouble. Nilakal is one area where you have to stop the vehicle, and from there you have to take a government bus for almost another 40 to 50 minutes to reach Pamba. That is actually, you have to cross the river. From there you have to walk another 5.5 kilometers. It became completely chaotic for Kerala government because they did not know where the people were coming from and how to stop them. But this time they claim that they have made arrangement. At the same time, Kerala government is yet to take a decision whether they would provide protection like last year, as I mentioned, to allow women to enter the shrine or not.
Okay.
So perhaps once the Kerala government decides it, we would know whether the protest will continue or not. But the temple gates will be opened on 16th, so we don't see the Kerala government having much time now.
Okay, let's put this forward to our panelists now. First to you, Yogita, in what has been decided by the Supreme Court to refer part of this to a larger bench, to a 7 bench. This is with respect to Article 25, this is with respect to Article 26 and the essential religious practices. Are you in agreement with that? That there is an aspect of the essential religious practices that needs to be revisited? That there is a right to a personal religious practice here?
Absolutely. If you look at it in a way of the larger picture, as I said earlier also, in the larger picture, larger context, it is very good because they are considering all the religions and not only Sabarimala. Sabarimala is one faith, but then they are looking at the other faith as well. So in a larger context, it's a very good direction. At least dialogue has started. At least people are, the Supreme Court has taken a note of it that, every woman, irrespective of which religion she is from, she has a right to her practice or a faith. Secondly, yes, the timings are a little crucial here. It's very sensitive situation. The doors are going to open again, two days to go, and even Supreme Court, maybe it was their tactic to kind of put it to the 7 member bench so that they buy time. Maybe, I don't know, I'm just guessing it like that. So the violence like situation which happened last year could have been avoided. Maybe it can be their thinking process which has gone into that. But in both the things, I think here we are a little disappointed, but at the same time it has been upheld. Women still can try to go, but the protesters are there. So here Kerala government has to play a crucial role, whether they really want women to go, and are they making that environment for the devotees, women devotees who would like to go for darshans. This is a big question, but because last year it was such a havoc situation that not even a single woman could.
Should we have expected clarity from the Supreme Court on that front? Kevin, Matthew, would you like to respond to this because of the anguish of a certain group which was so against the earlier judgment here? There were protests. It was very emotionally charged. The protests had turned violent as well. Should there have been a word from the Supreme Court here on this as well, that because this is still put on hold, the season would be open to women of all ages? Let's look at also a better way of handling the protests, if at all.
No, see, Supreme Court is not into deception tactics. The Supreme Court's function is to identify, develop on and create decisions. It is not into deception tactics. That is for somebody else. So Supreme Court has felt that the previous decision, the previous verdict was taken in hand. And you need more deliberations. There are larger issues at play. You need to look at it from even further perspective. Rather than making a very short and immature decision, let us take up the more correct decisions about finding correctness. And that is why it has gone to a larger bench, because you need more perspectives. You need further deliberation on it. So it is not Supreme Court playing call with crowd, okay, let us put it on hold for some time so that the public is received and there is no problem. And then once this issues, we can overturn this. It is not like that. That is absolutely childish from my fellow panelists to come out with that. Now, to the fact was this, Sabarimala has always been on the victim of a wrong narrative. It is not about patriarchy. It is not women. It is only because of the nature and behavior of the deity who happens to be in male form. So, and that too, lakhs and lakhs of women visit Sabarimala every year. There is only an age restriction pertaining to the nature of the deity. And see, you have to understand that Sabarimala is not a public place. A temple, a place of worship is not a public place. It is a private place owned by the deity for public worship. And there's a difference between the both. It is, Sabarimala is a prescription for men. You have to understand that Sabarimala is not.
Okay, we understand that what the argument has been from those who support on how the pilgrimage of Sabarimala has been carried on for the past so many years and centuries here. But Yogita, in the earlier judgment here, it was keeping in mind with respect to Article 14 and 19, which is equality and religious freedom. This aspect of it, which is today now being referred to a larger 7-judge bench, is going to take into account Article 25 and 26. That would go over and above 14 and 19.
So it's clashing with each other. I don't know. We have to wait for the wisdom of the new bench to come. Maybe that's the reason they have put it on the new bench. And but out of 5, I think 3 were definitely favoring it. I don't know what led to it. Maybe as we discussed earlier, maybe the larger picture. But here it is clashing, and there is always a clash. You know, that's the reason the Supreme Court's wisdom is very, very important. And let's see. I mean, I'm not sure, but I am very positive about that it will be upheld the same way, because my co-panelist was saying that you know, earlier they did some mistake. They want to kind of correct it, or that's why they are referring it. I really doubt that there was some, you know, they actually had studied this this whole history in the manuscripts. Everything was studied very well before giving the judgment. You can't doubt Supreme Court that way, you know, because they have done their R&D. That's why they got into this. But I really want...
You cannot.
Yes,
there is always
a room for improvement, but I think they are going for the larger picture, as I said.
Yeah, so
right.
That's
this particular issue is even bigger than Ayodhya verdict. So I would rather put it like that, because now they are coming out with the all religion things. You know, it's bigger than it's killing the patriarchal system. It is killing, and it is definitely patriarchal. So you know, this is a social fabric of this country. It's not easy. You know, it is going to be more tougher than Ayodhya verdict.
All right, those are differing personal views here on this. But Kevin Matthew, if the protests are to continue, we still don't know. This is the first day of this decision by the Supreme Court. We still don't know how this is going to be reflecting on ground with the start of the next season here, which is just a few weeks away here. If the protests continue, should there be restraint today? Not a repeat of what we'd seen last year.
So there should be restraint from both sides. See, first thing I want to put into your notice is, when this came, the verdict said devotees.
No, what do you mean by saying restraint from both sides?
Yes, let me explain that.
You mean women should not choose to come?
It never happened from the other side. It never happened.
No. Let me
explain. Let's have Kevin explain this.
Hear me out, please. If you look at the history, the kind of women that tried to make the entry take advantage of the verdict was there. See, their own statements prove that they were not devotees. They said they were not devotees. There was one lady who claimed that it was difficult to even carry the irumudikattu and follow the custom. So they just wanted to make an issue. See, this a matter of faith is of emotional importance to.
No, but how would you determine that? Kevin,
so
this again becomes extremely ambiguous. How do you determine a woman aged between that group of 15 to 50 years is a devotee who needs to go? Are you going to be doing a screening on that then?
No. I
at
said
the
it
bottom
is
of the hill.
ambiguous, and that is why I said so when you show restraint, it is not like when you suddenly hear this. Okay, now I'm going to break all the patriarchal norms and I'm going to enter the. That's not the way you should do it. You should take. You should try to understand what is happening there, and you see, engage in public discussion and reach a consensus. It's all about consensus. You need to find consensus. You need to understand why this is there, rather
So
than
it's
just go and.
legal for women to go there. What protesters are doing
Okay,
is illegal.
Yogita, are you comfortable with that? There is going to be
legal,
far
right?
more
You know,
scrutiny.
Supreme Court.
Hear me out, please. All right, keep pause. Kevin and Yogita, please hear me out. To you first, Yogita. Are you going to be comfortable with that here on women this season between the age of 15 to 50 years in that bracket who would like to go to Sabarimala, attempt going to Sabarimala as a devotee, are this season then going to be scanned and judged to check with how devoted they really are to be allowed to climb the shrine?
Who can decide who's a devotee, who's not a devotee? Nobody can really read between the lines. This is very personal. You can't kind of screen these kind of people who even people those who have been going there, all men. Of all age groups, how can you say devotion is subjective? You can't say. And the women, as per them, the women who tried to go there, they were just mere feminists and they just wanted to prove a point. But I had seen the women from Andhra Pradesh, they were devotees, they wanted to go. So it is very difficult to judge who's a devotee, who's a non-devotee. So irrespective of that, we should obey Supreme Court's order that anybody with any age group can go to the temple, and this is exactly what they wanted to do, but they were rushed off from there, and it was a violent protest from the people, those who were not willing let the women enter. So it's like, I would not say they were devotees. They can't be devotees, they can't take their path of violence if they were devotees. So subjective, it is very subjective. So
all right, Kevin, there are going to be questions asked here. Kevin, there are going to be questions asked on both sides. Just as you were saying that women of younger age who are attempting to do the pilgrimage, in your view, saying should be checked, should be scanned if they're really committed and they're really genuine devotees. There is going to be a scanning on the other side as well, on protesters turning violent. If you're really devoted, you would not allow violence to play out at the shrine there. This is going to be a scanning on both sides then. This is a responsibility on equal sides this season. Let's be very clear on that.
Take my words out of context. I never said devotees should be scanned or checked. I said you should ask yourself, this is something called conscious. Am I doing this because I'm a devotee? Or am I doing this because I want to create an issue? That comes on both sides. I said that comes on both sides.
Right, but Kevin, let's also ask the other question. Are you doing this violent protest because you're a devotee? That question should be asked as well. Let's not have violence. Are you indicating that emotions are going to be charged again? Okay, we're going to be reconnecting with Kevin on that in just a bit, but we've heard two opposite sides here on this. I'm going to go across to my correspondent, my colleague Pramod there, who was all of last season getting details, various aspects of this protest that had taken place last season. Pramod, there is a request that there be restraint shown on both sides. Are we expecting the temple administration to be sending out a word on that, on how the pilgrim season, when it opens, needs to operate? Okay, we're going to reconnect with Pramod on that as well in just a bit. Yogita, this is an important aspect here, that this should be taken in with as much as we say in Hindi, there needs to be astha, there needs to be respect to a certain place This should not become an open field of fighting for equality. It's not just a label or a tag that needs to be achieved on a religious ground. If that is entirely what you're driven by blindly, and then disrespecting the essence of this pilgrimage, that needs to be taken into account as well.
I completely agree that not to prove a point, one should just go being feminist just to, take the right of equality. I'm not in that favor. What I'm exactly just trying to say is that whosoever, see, I never tried going there. I mean, we just want to make a point that yes, if the Supreme Court has given the, right to enter, whosoever wants to go should let go. But the people, those who are protesting against the entry, should also not interfere. Nobody, can say that they are not keeping up to the religious faith. If the person wants to go, let the person, whosoever it is, whichever gender it is, should go. And protesters should only can speak like we are talking on channels, we are protesting in the sense of going there. They can also put their point across, but should not become
perhaps looking at hopefully this is going to be balanced this season in respecting both sides, in respecting both sentiments, in keeping that restraint, and also with respect to what the Supreme Court has indicated today, that aspect of essential religious practice. It is a personal religious law, it is a personal religious practice that needs to be further wider scrutinized. Can you have an administration or a law impeding upon that as well? Because that remains personal. That personal space then needs to be respected. Thank you for being with us.